Hello and welcome to Conference Showcase. I'm your host Gary Leland, bringing you another session that I attended. If you found our show on Facebook, YouTube, or basically any other video sharing site, please check out my website, and it's located at conferenceshowcase.com. It's the place to find all the videos that I'm going to record and put up from all the conferences that I'm going to attend. Now, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about us. On this episode, I'm bringing you a session from Podcamp Dallas that was held in October of 2012. I know I'm going to be getting this up. If you're not familiar with Podcamp Dallas, you really should check out their website at podcampdallas.com, of course. Now, in this episode, I'm bringing you a session with AJ Wood, and it's titled Building Your Audience. Let's watch it now.
You click on any one of those individual channels, they are actually just as popular as her main show. So some talent, some expertise, some engagement, there's more to it than that, right? And you could simply just be entertaining and get yourself 4 million subscribers and 785 million views, right? Again, I'm starting to see a pattern because this is another blonde, right? Okay. So when we talk about building an audience, when you think about building an audience, this is what I want you to start off with, right? You're looking at this going, hey, that's where I want to be. But this is what I want you to start off with. What I want you to think about is, why? Why do you want to build an audience? Okay, what's the point of doing it? Why do you want to build an audience? Are you trying to build an audience because you want to monetize something? Is that the reason that you're trying to build your audience, because it's going to drive revenue for you? Okay. Are you trying to build an audience to promote a different product? Maybe the point of your podcast is not to make money in itself. Maybe the point of your podcast is to be used as a marketing arm to get you business in other areas. Okay. Why are you building the podcast? Do you simply just want to engage and connect with your community? You have a passion about comic books. You want to talk to other people who like comic books. That's your podcast. You don't care if it makes any money. You just want to connect with other people in that community. So why do you want to build an audience? Once you decide why you want to build an audience, who are they? Who is your audience? Who are you targeting? Are you targeting other technology folks? Are you targeting teenagers? Are you targeting baby boomers? Who are the people that you're trying to target with your with your podcast? You can't build the audience if you don't know who you're going after. So who are you trying to reach out to? Who are you trying to connect with? Who will be entertained? Who will find you useful? If I spend all my time marketing to other photographers, we're all kind of competing for the same business. That might not be useful to me. That might not be my audience. Unless I want to teach other photographers. Then maybe that's useful. So who are you actually building as your audience? Who is your audience? Okay. The next thing you should think about is, what does that audience want? You know why you want to build an audience for you. You know who you're going to go after for that audience, but what do they want? Because just because they're the people that you want to target, you have to provide something useful to them or something entertaining to them. What is it that they want? Do they want to be entertained? Do they need the information that you're presenting? Where are they? Are you targeting an audience that's local to you, that you can actually reach out and physically touch? Okay. Will your marketing efforts then be local to that community that you can reach out to? Or are you trying for an international audience? And then the most important question, how are they going to connect with you? Because is the audience that you're targeting, are they on mobile? You're you have great content, you're funny, you're talented, you're an expert, you put all your content together, and if you only put it on one channel and decide that it's going to be accessible to PC desktops only, and your audience is on mobile, you're missing. So when you go to build your audience, these are the things that you should consider. Why do you want to build that audience? Who are the people that you're targeting? What do they want from you? Where are they? And how are they going to connect with your content? Because maybe you want to do a video podcast, but in doing the research, you find out an audio podcast might be more appropriate to that audience. Maybe be the flip side of that. You thought you'd just do a radio show and really video would make more of a connection. So as you go to build out your podcast, do your research. All right. Now I know some people say, hey, I have content, I'll just build it and it'll show up. Okay? I get that all the time, but if you have known me throughout the years, one of the things is, and I stress this to the people I meet all the time, just because you have the passion for, say, wedding photography, does not mean you know how to run a wedding photography business. So if you asked all the questions on the previous page, then you know if for you building an audience is something that you want to monetize, or something you want to promote, or something you're just doing for fun. If you tell me, look, I'm trying to make money with my podcast, and I'm going to retire off of that, then you need to do some research. All the things that we talked about. Right? Research your audience, find out where they are. Find out what kind of content they want. See who your competition is. Do the research. That means that you're going to have a plan. Sure, you can just throw some content out now in the background, right? But you want to have a plan. You want to be organized. Right? You want to actually have some real content. That's going to help you market it. That's going to help you drive your SEO. And then I already heard it earlier, the most important thing, be consistent. Right? That's probably one of the biggest things I see is it's really easy to kind of pull the assets together, and a lot of us now, you have the technology, you can do a podcast on your own, audio, video, you could do it by yourself, you could self-produce. Right? I have a YouTube channel, I've done over 100 videos, it was all self-produced, I did it on my own, right? But you have to have consistency, because it's been mentioned already a few times today, audiences are fickle. If I want to do a Photoshop podcast, there are any number of people already doing a Photoshop podcast. Not only does the content have to be good, not only do I have to be entertaining and the information useful, but I have to come up with a spin for the delivery. But if I just kind of throw it out there every so often, hey, I think this week I'm going to do a podcast, it'll really never gain any traction. Because if you don't have consistency, you're not going to build trust with your audience. It'll be hard to build the engagement. It'll be hard to build the community, unless you happen to get a viral video win. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to continually come back. Right? So consistency is key. This is why I think research and planning are important. If you're just throwing it out there off the cuff, one, it's going to look kind of sloppy to start, and maybe it gets polished over time. But one day you're going to get up and not feel like doing it, so you don't do it. And maybe one day turns into 1 week, turns into 1 month, and then before you know it, it's 3 months later and people are messaging you on your channel going, where did you go? We loved your stuff, we miss you. So then maybe you get back into it. Oh, maybe I can do some videos now. Okay? And then you have this ebb and flow where you kind of show up and throw some content out there and then you disappear. Right? And you kind of show up and throw some content out there and then disappear. Right? And then that becomes kind of the expectation, that becomes the reputation, and people won't engage over time. Right? Because it's my understanding, or at least my thought, that if you're trying to build an audience, you want to build something with a long-term plan. Right? A podcast isn't necessarily a sprint, it's more like a marathon. So I see lots of hands. I'll start over here, because you were just sitting there like you were holding and getting ready to do the queen leg.
Patience is a, well, I shouldn't say that. No, question for you in research. Are you a fan? I'm good. I usually check. Yeah, thank you. Are you speaking paid for research, or are you? There's a lot of ways to go find what somebody thinks about something, sure. But what's your recommendation on expertise?
Right. So in terms of research, certainly if you have the financial means, then paid research is the way to go. Certainly if we're talking about a business, right, then I would invest in some paid research. So, but you can do your own research, right? You can go out and talk to people. You can do a poll on your website. You can, do polls on Facebook. You can look at the insights on your Facebook or your YouTube and things. Right? A lot of that research can also be kind of done over time. I have actually modified content in a podcast based on what is working and what is not. Right?
Favorite paid for?
I do not have a favorite paid for.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, there was a back here, right there.
Oh, no, I was trying to get your attention to.
Oh, okay. You were doing a secondary wave, right? Yeah, it should have been a point, right? The wave directs to you. The point would be over there. Okay, I got it. But back here, I think there's an arm. Maybe? No?
So, just to add to the paid for, there's a lot of people that use websites like Fiverr.com. They outsource a lot. You can pay somebody over the internet to do the research for you. If you go, somebody mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk earlier. He's got a book out called Crush It. He's got a lot of tips on that also.
What was the website reference you just gave?
Fiverr.com.
Okay.
And basically it's small jobs for $5. Everything from something like writing your girlfriend's name, a poem to your girlfriend in the sand. They'll videotape it and send it to her for you, things like that. But you also get people that really do good work. And then if I'm not mistaken, Amazon.com, they've got a subsidiary that people can post jobs that they'll do or things that they can take care of.
It's a mechanical turk.
That's it, yes.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, something else I want to mention, kind of dovetailing on that. With your podcast, whatever it might be, with your podcast, whatever it might be. In my case, I actually used my podcast not to monetize it, although it enjoyed some monetization because it was on YouTube, right? But I used my podcast as a marketing tool, right? So I made my money before Adobe hired me in public speaking and doing one-on-one training and doing enterprise level training. And that was all based on being available and being showcased and being shown as a subject matter expert because of my podcast, right? I put the content out on a regular basis. The content was derived from my audience submitting questions and from students submitting questions or questions I got in the field. So the content I was building was relevant to the people who wanted it, which helped drive up the views on the content. But more importantly, I used it as a marketing tool. That was why I built my audience. I built my audience to get word of mouth so that I could get gigs, so that I could get jobs. I really didn't care if the podcast in itself was monetized. Right? My audience was customers. Right? I used it as an advertising vehicle. Right? So you want to think about that. So I made sure that I was relevant on mobile, which is one of the reasons I chose YouTube as a platform. But we heard about other platforms today, right? So Blip TV, Vimeo, and all those different things. I never actually pursued those channels because it wasn't necessary for me. Right? Do I think those channels were relevant? Absolutely. Right? But this is why you should think about, what are you trying to build? What are you trying to target? It's not just, hey, build the content and they show up. Right? The other thing too is if you look at a lot of the channels, it's built over time. I have I'm getting close to 2 million views on YouTube, but I've been on YouTube since 2007. I didn't actually start using YouTube as a marketing platform until 2010. Right? The first initial views, the first initial set of subscribers, really small. It wasn't until I was more consistent about how I posted so people could expect it. It wasn't until I was more consistent about how I engaged my audience that the numbers grew. And then, it just kind of spiraled from there. But you have to have an action plan. Right? So many times I just see people saying, I have this idea, and we could do this, and you've got all the necessary components to kind of build it together, but there's really no thought beyond just getting it together and getting it out there. What is the purpose of building this audience? What are they going to do for you? What are you going to do for them? What's the long-term prospects of that? And I don't think enough people think about that. Because anybody really can take the technology and build something and put it out there. It's really easy to do. Right? So,
one of the things that you talk about relevancy that also gets talked about a lot when you're dealing with blogging or actually text information goes back to what they call evergreen, something that people will go back and read later on down the line. And that kind of is what the first website that you showed with the father and daughter singing. It's like cat videos or dog videos. It's never going to go out of style. People 5-10 years down the line can go back and watch it.
Right.
But you can also do that with informational types. If you put out information that's not going to change over a longer period of time, that's how you can build up subscribers also.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess it's just a different type of relevancy. You're just giving it longevity.
Right. Yeah, and that's something to consider if you're doing, in my case, I do a lot of product videos, and I do a lot of product how-to videos. I made it a point early on to try not to focus on here is the product and here's the technique, but it's only specific to this version. Okay? Those have a place, and those have done very well, but they seem to do very well right when the product's released. Okay? Once the product has some life to it, then it doesn't become as relevant. So the majority of the videos that I've put up could be used in older versions of the software continued through. And if it was relevant to the context of the video, I might do a follow-up, right? And then you link those videos together, right? I also, might mention it in the actual video itself. So, are there questions that you have about building out an audience or things that you have come across? Oh, you're just all tired from lunch? Yes, Mitch.
Could you talk a little bit more about the conversations, the dialogue you have with your followers? on
Sure.
YouTube?
So for myself, if we talk about the social media aspect, we have, of course, Twitter, we have Facebook, we have Google+, we have LinkedIn, right? Those four. Am I missing any? I guess Pinterest or Pinterest.
MySpace is back.
Yeah, MySpace is back, right? So, Justin Timberlake, doing that, making the rounds. As far as the social media goes, I will tell you that you could be in all the channels, right? But then that goes back to what I feel is overlooked: research, planning, strategy, right? Content strategy. I have done very well on Twitter, but I'm not using Twitter today. Early on, I was using Twitter. I was glued with my eyeballs on two monitors and was interacting. And I think it was 6 months, and then my wife said, "Hey, you need to get off that because it's dinner time." Right. So Twitter was really good for me because it was real-time engagement, and it was very useful because if I was engaged with the audience all the time. Right, I was using Twitter as a search tool, which I still think is relevant. I was searching for Photoshop and then answering questions on Twitter in real time to get people hooked, and then pointing them to my website, pointing them to my podcast, and saying, "Look, here's more stuff." Right. So when I'm actually sleeping, maybe when you can see it, when you can't actually talk to me. So that was really good for real-time engagement. I have found more success, long success, with Facebook. The reason being is on Twitter, if I post something and you don't see it, that's it, it's gone. If you ask a question and I'm not looking at that moment, I don't see it, I can't answer it. But if I post something on Facebook, it usually has a life of about a week. Because if I post it, you don't have to see it right there. You might see it in your news feed later on in the day, or if you're actually following my page, which a lot of people do, then you know that I post content on a regular schedule. And that goes back to consistency. I am constantly posting content on my Facebook page. People expect that, so they know, hey, if I check once a day or every couple of days, there's going to be something useful, right? The other thing that relates to your content, as you're building out your audience, we talk about the trust and the engagement you have, right? If you've asked yourself those questions about what type of audience you want and who they are, you're not going to have, say, a technology or photography podcast where all of a sudden you throw up a cat video. Because that's going to be maybe entertaining, but it's also going to, disable that trust, right? So if you have a podcast that relates to a particular topic and you're hosting it on your website, don't confuse that with your personal blog. Because maybe your podcast has to do with, music from the 80s. And so you're talking about that and you're reviewing it and people are digging it. And then one day you just go off on a political rant because it's that time of the year. And we see that in our Facebook feeds, right? And don't talk to people anymore because of that. Well, you're losing an audience because you threw up something that was personal that was completely irrelevant to whatever your podcast is about. Right. So you want to think about that as well. Do you want to have a personal blog? Great. Nothing wrong with a personal blog. Do you want to have a podcast on a particular topic? Awesome. Try and keep it relative to that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be personal in there. If you go to my Facebook page, if you've watched my YouTube videos, right, I will throw in personal anecdotes and things. But I'll try and make them relevant to the story that I'm trying to tell or what I'm trying to share with the audience, and still try and keep it on point. So I see that quite a bit too, is you'll kind of get off topic and then your audience loses out. As far as engagement, Facebook has worked really well for me because people can post questions or send me questions. I can answer them on Facebook with a video or with text, and that actually disseminates out to the audience. Google Plus, I think, can be relevant. I find it a cross between Twitter and Facebook. I think it's like Twitter because it's more real time than Facebook. I think the audience is more niche. So I'm seeing more, photographers or media types using Google+. But you can get some great interaction there. I have received better real-time interaction from Google+, meaning I hop on a plane, I fly into Chicago, and if I post on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, right now, Google+ will get me more engaged. Okay. Twitter, not so much because I'm not seeing the same types of interaction on Twitter as I did, say a couple years ago. Right? Facebook, people will be like, oh, I didn't see your post. It's 2 hours later and I'm not at the pub. Right? But Google Plus, for some reason, eyeballs right now are kind of glued to that. So, yes.
Question for you about managing your content from a sort of okay, this is what I'm going to do the next 6 months versus, hey, I'm talking about this afternoon.
Sure.
Do you manage your blog that way as though you give it a sense of longevity, but you're also overhanging content and the risk of somebody else picking it up and doing it better?
My personal feeling for content strategy is if you can pre-bake some content that's going to help you be consistent, right? I know probably everyone in the room has other things they do aside from just your podcast. I will tell you my podcast was the most successful when I really, really needed it as the marketing arm. I know I had all these hours. And by golly, I was cranking all kinds of episodes. Right? And then I actually took on some projects, and then I was doing the projects, and then in 3 in the morning doing the podcast. Right? And then that worked really well until one day I actually needed to sleep. Right? So this is why I say you have to research, you have to plan. You need to, okay, I want to do a podcast, it's going to be once a week. Then you can account for the hours that it will take to produce that podcast. If you say, oh my gosh, it would be awesome to do a podcast 3 days a week. It's going to be awesome until you figure out, wait, I don't actually have the single production hour time to do the podcast myself. All right. The other thing too, and I can't discount this enough, is the technology is going to let you self-produce. But if you can partner with other people and you can have people help, for a podcast, that's awesome. Because now you're offloading some of the things. If you can, I would love to just be the talent and show up. Right? So just turn stuff, I will talk, and I can talk some more. And then leave, and you guys can do all the equipment stuff. But more often than not, I have self-produced. Right? And there's a lot of time. Anyone in the room can tell you there's a lot of time having all those pieces. So yes, I think if you can pre-bake some content, right, it's great. I think for relevancy though, depending on who your audience is, sometimes they want to know what's going on right at this moment. Right? So, tutorials and how-tos are a little bit easier to pre-bake because there's no time based to that. Right. And there, of course, there are several people in the room who can talk to you about production techniques as far as how to, front-end load it and have your content so that you really can make content that's timeless. Right. Some of the things that I did early on is I record everything in one take, so there was no segue, there was no cut and paste. So if I said it was Friday, it had to go on Friday because that's how I recorded it. It'll be hard to use it later because I said it was Friday, what the date was. Right. So you want to think about those things too. Other questions? Yes?
Well, sometimes when you're a blogger, you might encourage guest posts, which gives you additional content. It also helps make some cross-promotion. It helps them, and it helps you. Were you able to do anything like that for your podcast?
Actually, yes, I was. So again, for me, my podcast was used specifically as a marketing tool. So yes, I did cross promotion. I would either make appearances on other video blogs. So I did some appearances on GeekBeat. right? I did a lot of writing, and I still do lots of writing. So I wrote for relevant magazines like Photoshop User Magazine. And what's nice about writing for some of the magazines is the digital versions of those publications, the links are live, right? So I wrote for Photoshop User Magazine, they gave me a author bio, and then in the digital version of that publication, the links to my website were live, right? So I actually got a lot of foot traffic off of that because Photoshop User Magazine has a really good mobile audience, right? So, yes, cross-promotion for sure. And then as far as guest articles, anytime someone asks me to write, if it's really relevant to what I'm doing, then generally I'm more than happy to do it. Yeah. So I know in the back I saw hands. Yes.
I was just going to second what you're saying. We do that a lot with SiliconANGLE. We originally started as syndication agreements with Fortune and Forbes. We found that when we wrote occasional original content for them as opposed to syndicating full feeds or full categories, it was a lot more of an effective thing called, we now call it our tip of the spear strategy. So if we have an editorial theme we really want to emphasize or get out there to a wider audience than we normally get, we'll do a quick post on Forbes that highlights a video or an article that we've already written somewhere else.
Yeah, that's good. So the other thing too that I found is depending on what type of podcast you're creating and who you want your audience to be. Early on, I was the one asking people, hey, you mind if I guest write? So, and now, of course, it's flipped, and probably only because I shill for the man, right? And because of that, I get like constant pings. Hey, can I write for you? Hey, I know you have this blog, and I want to write. And it's been interesting from that standpoint. Hey, I want to do a guest video with you. I have not actually recorded a new video since April, so I have been bad, right? So I'm a prime example of what happens when you don't do stuff, right? So not only am I telling you what you should do, don't follow my example and do the bad stuff, right? But having said that, I'm still based on the success of the podcast and the relevancy of the content. I'm still gaining subscribers. I'm still gaining viewers. Now, I'm not putting video content out, but because I have an audience, I'm staying engaged by using social media. So I still answer questions on Twitter. I still keep people engaged on Facebook. And then I'm actually still writing. So while my podcast in itself isn't doing anything, right, there's no new videos, the podcast is still relevant because I'm still talking about it in other channels, right? And I still actually, because the content itself is timeless, I still can reference that. So I have seen new articles written on other sites that reference the videos. I know I have some friends who are authors, and they have referenced the videos, either in conversations or engagements that they have. So that's another thing to keep in mind in terms of content. Yes?
Yeah, AJ, what do you do to pre-qualify? Because I'm in Lean Six Sigma, which is, and I've had people trying to jump on board with me, but you really have to pre-qualify. I mean, the folks that want to guest, how do you pre-qualify, because you wouldn't want someone to dilute your brand.
Sure. A lot of times.
It's really hardcore on because, they can just take over and kind of jump on ship.
Yeah, as far as the technical aspect,
yeah,
they're going to write the article and actually email it to me, and I'm going to approve it and I'll post it.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to actually give them access to WordPress or accounts or anything like that. In terms of research, everyone has some sort of social media profile. So I'm going to just take a look at their professional and their, the personal profiles.
So you might actually, in a kind and gracious way, turn down, because I'm having some folks approach me where I don't want to. You just kind of, because you don't want to burn that bridge.
Sure.
Also,
sure. Yeah, and yes, you definitely don't want to end things badly, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always as polite as I can be.
Exactly.
And really, for myself, I'm not putting out as much content right now. So I generally, send a response that says, thank you for your interest, and I'm going to do my due diligence, and I have a list, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but usually it's something relevant on topic, and because my content is not something where I regularly feature people, it's not an expectation. It would be different if it was something that I regularly feature guest posters and now people are just lining up to do it. But that's not the case. So usually they've been one-offs. So it's a little bit easier to manage. So I've just been surprised at the change only because the timing was right when I started working directly with Adobe.
Great, thank you so much.
Mhm. Anyone else? No?
I have a question. AJ,
Yes.
how did you get the people that, like you said you were doing it to reach people that might want to hire you.
Mhm.
So how did you try to reach out to those specific people? Did you have certain things you did like with SEO, or because just tweeting and just Facebooking and stuff like that isn't necessarily going to reach out to just those people who might want to hire you?
Right. So I did a few things. With the podcast specifically, all the content was created from questions I had received at one point or another. And so it wasn't just, I just wrote something off the board and said, hey, you know, making a drop shadow would be really cool. Let's set some stuff on fire and let's see if people react to that, right? I had people say, how do you set stuff on fire? Right? Which concerned me, but then I knew they were talking about Photoshop, and so I made that video. So I knew right away that the content that I was creating was relevant, and what I did is, for every person who asked, or every group that kind of asked, once I had created the video, I shot them a message and said, hey, remember when you asked me about how to do this, and I kind of told you how to do it? Well, now there's a video on it, right? And that helped kind of kick off the videos. The other thing that I did is I made sure that once I had the podcast and started creating it, and I wanted to build that audience, I put things in my signature. I emailed existing clients, right? Because I already had my own list from my business. So when the podcast came, I said, hey, here's a new thing that we're doing. Please check this out, right? And I was already engaged with clients, either doing training classes or public speaking, so that was another venue to say, hey, if you really enjoyed the presentation today, I have more content online, right? Or when I taught a class, and that's something that I still do today, right? Well, I'm still teaching today for Texas A&M Commerce. So one of the things that I do for the class that I teach is I use my videos in the class. Now, I don't use them as part of the lecture, but what I do is when I deliver a lecture, I have at least 4 videos that tie into the lecture that I can refer the students to. So when I maintain that relationship with the students through my website and through Facebook, so I'm maintaining that engagement. And then the students will see the videos, and that leads them to watch some of the other videos if they want to stay ahead of the lectures, right? Or more importantly, as it goes to building an audience and staying relevant, I have students in my classes right now that will take the videos and share them with students who have not taken my class. At my classes right now at Texas A&M Commerce, I'm very pleased to say I have a waiting list. So I have a 3-semester waiting list to get into my classes because students are watching the videos, because they're getting the videos from other students, right? So, but yeah, so I just made sure that I put it out there everywhere. I fortunately didn't have to do, you know, your traditional advertising, but I put it on my business cards, right? Or if I engage somebody in a conversation, I said, hey, you know, I happen to have a video on that. I made sure that I kept you know, videos on all my devices, right? So I've got a couple of my videos on my phone. I have them on my iPad. If I'm in a conversation and it's relevant, you know, I don't just say, hey, watch me, right? But if it's relevant, I'll pull that out and say, hey, you know, I actually have a video on that, and then I can just, you know, bang the URL, or I actually have, you know, bump shared, you know, a video with folks. So, and I spend more time, honestly, and this is not about podcasts, but this is just about building relationships. When I'm in a public domain where I'm networking with people, I never give people my business card. In fact, you know me, I never actually have a business card when you ask. I'm very bad about that. But what I do when I'm actually trying to network is I always ask for your business card. Why would I ask for your business card and not give you mine? You wouldn't know.
Cheap.
Yeah, cheap, right? What do people do with business cards? Please tell me what you do when you get a business card. What do you do?
I have a stack of about 30,000 of them.
Yeah, you probably have a stack, or you probably throw it away, or you probably, you know, have it, unless there's something you need, right? I always ask for your business card because on the back of it I wrote what we talk about, right? So that when I reach out to you on LinkedIn, I can say, hey, remember we met at this place and we talked about X, and I would like to connect with you on LinkedIn, right? So I always ask for the business card because I'm about building the relationship with you. Right? So that was an opportunity for me to take your business card and say, hey, we had a conversation about X. I happen to have a video on that. Please feel free to check it out when you get a chance. And that's how I build up, from a hand, or on a street level, built up my audience. So reaching out to those people directly and trying to provide them with the content that they wanted to see. Right? But it goes back to these questions. I knew who I wanted to go after. I need these companies to see those videos so they know I'm an expert on this topic, so they'll ask me to come and speak on it. But I need these people to see these videos so they can see that I'm capable of producing this type of content so that it's relevant. Right? And I use primarily, like I said, as far as social media, Facebook. I had actually a lot of success with Google Plus because it ties into YouTube and all the SEO, right? And then Twitter every so often. So. You're welcome.
That was one of the things you mentioned earlier was Twitter and how you would search for certain words like Photoshop and then answer questions. Those companies out there, they're also looking for those words that are relevant to them. So if they see him answering those questions and actually being on point, then they're going to make note of that. And also you mentioned LinkedIn. I'm still new to LinkedIn and everything, but can you upload videos to it? Because I was going to say, any kind of content that you produce, upload it to LinkedIn because people also look for it there. Companies are always looking for content like that. And again, Google Plus, pretty much like people were talking about earlier, pretty much every platform, Facebook, Twitter, now you've got Google Plus, you've got LinkedIn. The more the content's out there and it's hitting the keywords, those companies are looking for that also. And that's the other way to build the relationships because they're looking for it just like you are.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to what we talked about, consistency. And consistency not only in how you're delivering your content, I really think you should decide ahead of time what your schedule is going to be and maintain that. If you commit to 3 days a week, then you have to say, okay, for 1 year, we're doing 3 days a week. You can't do 3 days a week and then like a couple months later go like, oh my God, no 1 day a week and then I can actually see people, right? You can't really be fickle in that aspect because if you're on a YouTube subscriber list, I will tell you just from looking at my own statistics, YouTube subscribers are so fickle. Right? You miss a day, and I've actually literally had people send me like hate messages because I missed a day. Where were you on Monday? I expected a video, and the video wasn't there. Right? Or I was doing a thing for a while where my show was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but I did like one product Monday, one product Wednesday, and so you knew if you showed up Monday was this product. Right? And then I decided to change it. I was like, oh no, it's not working because I was seeing numbers not really consistent. So I said, okay, I'll just do like one product for a couple weeks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I had people email me for that. Going, wait, it's Monday, and you were going to show me this, and I didn't see it, and I don't want to know Photoshop, and and they get mad. So you really have to think about how am I delivering the content? How often is it going to be? What's that relevant content going to be? Right. So, and then consistency in terms of the delivery, but also how it's produced. Right. Is it polished? Is it not polished? Right. I really think it's better if you can polish the content, but I know based on resources and time, sometimes it's not as perfect as you would like it to be, right? And that's why a lot of products get better over time. So, but yeah, consistency is an important part. You guys, yes.
Could you go through the process of how you would put your podcast together, the amount of time it would take, the work you had to do to put just a single one out there? Just to give people an idea.
Sure. So I think my podcast was a little bit different because unlike a lot of us here today, I didn't have a whole lot of video production experience before I did my podcast. So while I knew how to cut and edit video, I was finding in my initial runs that the turnaround time was not what I wanted. So my actual podcast on YouTube, every episode that you see was shot in a single take. Right? So if it was a 5-minute tip on how to create a drop shadow in Photoshop, I shot that in one take and edited it all together. If it was a 15-minute, much longer tip, then I still shot it in one take. Now I did that enough over the course of a year that when I first started, I think one 15-minute take took me like 4 hours, right? Because I'm now talking, my nose itches, hold on a second, right, and then I'd start recording again. But by the end of that year, if I had to do a 5-minute take, I could walk up and turn on the camera and do the 5-minute take. So, and I did that mainly because I was using a camera FireWire to my laptop, and then I was using screen capture software. In my case, it was ScreenFlow. So I was capturing 2 videos in real time. And what I wanted to do with my podcast that was different than other screencasts is I know from having watched them that there was a lot of dead air time, where you'd hear the person say, and now we're going to do this, and they would talk about whatever that technique is for 5 minutes, and then actually move the mouse and start doing stuff. Very few screencasts were actually just showing you a tip and moving through the tip the whole time. There was always at least 10 to 30 seconds of just dead air just sitting there. So I made it a point that if I was going to have something that I needed to talk about, I would change the camera. So I went from here's on screen and stuff is moving, and now I need to tell you something, I would throw the camera focus on me and I would actually talk to the camera, right? And then I would jump back and forth. So I found that that style of video wasn't being done very much at the time. There's more videos now kind of shot in that vein, but I found that drove up my viewership. I got more engagement because it wasn't just a screencast and you have to sit there and watch the whole thing, right? So that really worked for me. But like I said, from my experience, it was easier for me to shoot it all in one take than it was to try and splice it all together later. Yes?
Yeah, but before you do that one take, how much time did you start in? How much time did you spend in rehearsal, or do you script your podcast before you actually do that?
That's a really good question. So I would tell you that every podcast I storyboard, I would storyboard it up. And what I would specifically storyboard is, here's the topic, and here's where I think all the camera cutaways will happen, right? So, and that was really more for the post-production. So here's where I think all the camera cutaways will happen. So I would storyboard it just really for the camera cutaways, and then just kind of outline what the topic would be. But I never scripted it. So, because I wanted the presentation style, the delivery style, to be more kind of off the cuff, right? So, and yeah, and I didn't have a teleprompter or anything fancy that I could work off of. So, I just had the outline in my head and would deliver it. So, yes.
So, like, having your conversation on social media, do you ever look at the analytical data from each podcast episode and kind of switch your content to that?
Yes, and that was the question that was asked earlier. I did do that. I did change up some of the delivery of the podcast based on where the engagement, where the drop-offs were, right? One of the things with the podcast that I would change if I, put some newer episodes on is the lead-in time. So, because I kind of set it up to be kind of like a show. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Last week we talked about X. Today we're going to talk about Y. Let's get into it. And so I was seeing a lot of people just jump ahead past the intro, because the little bumper on the front was maybe 5 seconds, but then my intro about what we're talking about was maybe 30 seconds to a minute. So you're a minute and 30 before you actually get to the tip. And I found more people kind of jumping, that want to get right to the tip. So, if I were to redo it, I'd make the bumper shorter and then just jump right into wherever the tip is. So, but I found more overall engagement once you were in the video because I did that style where I jumped between being on camera and, showing. So what it actually was. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes?
How long do you run a video before you decide to change it due to the analytics of it?
In my case, for the podcast, I think I ran maybe 15 videos, right? 15 videos before I started really kind of modifying things. So, I would always be looking at the analytics over time, and if I really saw something jump out, then I would modify it. But I was trying to look for a trend.
So on average, that's kind of like 15 weeks or?
Well, no, I was doing the video 3 times a week, so
okay.
5 weeks, yeah. Yep. So after about a month. So is there another hand over on this side, or? Oh, over there.
Sorry, Les.
No, it's okay.
You might have touched on it, but the measures of success, what are the best analytics to use to gauge the performance of your podcast, or where would you say I step back after it's over and say, did I or didn't I, other than 5 likes?
So this is something that I think is relevant to your podcast, and then it goes to the whole social media conversation. When we talk about building out an audience, there is quantity versus quality. Right. I have 5,000 users. I have 10,000 users. There's quality versus quantity. I personally feel, because again, I was using the podcast as a medium for advertising. If I was getting gigs off of it, then it didn't matter if I had 200 subscribers or if I had 15,000 subscribers. In terms of relevance to monetization on YouTube, yes, the more subscribers you have, it's a numbers game, right? You'll get a little bit more off the ad clicks and whatnot. Right? But I would rather have a smaller audience that's highly engaged. Okay? On Facebook, I don't have a big audience. I only have about 2,800 people, which is not very large in terms of numbers on Facebook. However, I have a very engaged audience. Right? So on average, when I post something on Facebook, I'm getting lots of clicks on it, but I'm also getting lots of comments, and I'm getting engagement. So that's more important to me. So in terms of actually measuring it, I'm looking at all the different analytics on the different platforms, the Facebook Insights and your YouTube analytics, and I've got Google Analytics on my websites and whatnot. But for me, I was measuring it more in terms of, is the phone ringing? Right? Are people reacting to something I post out on a mailer?
So that's the customer behavior, for the client behavior, from the standpoint of the performance of the video itself, or that is, you mentioned Google Analytics. Do each of the different ways that you distribute your content, will each of those have an analytics package or things you can do to say, okay, I might have thought I looked great, but there really was a terrible experience for someone trying to consume, which would then explain your customer behavior. So looking at the actual delivery of the content, just step back and say from a logistics or a performance standpoint, which of the different ways that you distribute your information are the better in terms of giving you a way to measure its quality or speed of delivery, those types of things?
I think the YouTube analytics are very detailed.
Okay.
Right. So detailed to the point where I can see where the drop off is, right? You can see the eyeball, right? And so I think their metrics there are very detailed. So what I can do is watch the video, and if everyone's dropping off at a minute and a half or jumping ahead, well, I knew, okay, it's because the bumper is this long, because I'm talking about it that long, and here's where it's happening, right? I also knew that if I was putting up my face on camera too much, right, or not putting it up at all, I could see where the drop off was. On specific topics. So yeah, I can't speak to Vimeo. I haven't used that as a platform. But most of the tools that are out there, or the platforms that are there, give you pretty decent metrics. I can see on Facebook with their insights what content generally drives the most clicks. Right? I know right now if I post a picture of my daughter, I'll get at least 400 views, right? And at least 20 people will share it, because right now she's cute. Next year she's 5, she has to work. Help contribute, right? So, but yeah, so they are very detailed on the different platforms. I'm not using some paid service. Now there are some really good paid services out there, right? I do use Woopra from my website, and I like Woopra because it's real-time analytics. So I can actually, pull that up on my iPhone or my iPad or on my desktop and see people engaging with the website in real time. And I did use that as a means of, hey, there's somebody on the website right now and they're on this page and they're looking at that video. And I could actually ping them in real time and say, hey, what did you think of that video? And which freaks them out because they're like, wait, my browser's talking to me, right? So there are third-party metrics that you could use. Woopra is one of my favorites.
There's a startup in San Antonio right now called Callisto FM, and they're doing real-time podcast analytics.
How do you spell that?
Callisto, CALISTO.FM, and they're down in a startup incubator down in San Antonio, so they'll be here soon. You might be able to get in with them in a early program.
Okay,
Thank
you.
So any other questions? I think we're almost at the top of the hour. No? All right, appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this week's session. Make sure and check back for future video sessions from Podcamp Dallas, as well as other sessions that I attend. Now, before I go, I want to share something with you. I really am kind of excited about this. I've started an e-magazine for the iPad. It's really doing great. Now, I have no background in publishing at all, but I found it a snap. Now, if you've ever thought that you'd like to publish an e-magazine, but you really don't know how to do it or where to go, you may want to visit Magcast. That's the service I use to create my magazine. Like I said, it's easy. Actually, it's almost foolproof. You can see for yourself, though, at magcast.fastpitch.tv. That's my affiliate code, of course. But that's all for today. So until the next episode, this is your host, Gary Leland, saying goodbye, and thanks for watching.